Okay, let's talk about João Goulart, his presidency in Brazil.
Well, it's a really compelling story, isn't it? It ends so abruptly.
It really does. Not a slow fade, but this dramatic, kind of mysterious fall in 1964.
Yeah. Django, as people called him,
Hmm.
Brazil's 24th president, and then boom, a military coup just 3 years in. It makes you wonder what really went down.
Absolutely, and that's what we're trying to unpack in this deep dive. Goulart's fall wasn't just, a local Brazilian issue.
No, it feels bigger.
It is. It's a powerful example of how internal politics, domestic struggles can get tangled up with these huge global power plays.
Right. So our mission here is to look at this source material we have, this excerpt, and really explore that time, the forces at play, the key people.
And how the whole Cold War climate basically fueled the fire that ended Brazil's democratic run back then.
Exactly. This source gives us a good starting point, laying out Goulart's background. He wasn't your typical politician from the elite class. No, he came from the Brazilian Labor Party, the PTB, became president in 61. It was after Genio Quadros just suddenly resigned, came out of nowhere for many.
And that labor background really shaped his presidency, didn't it? His focus was on workers' rights, social welfare.
Definitely. And that's where the trouble started, essentially. His ideas were progressive. Things like land reform, programs to tackle Brazil's massive inequality.
Which sounds good on paper, but
But it seriously rattled the established powers.
Yeah.
Think about the military, the big agricultural landowners, the major business leaders. They saw this as a direct threat.
a threat to their control, their economic power.
Precisely, their political influence too. And then you
Wow.
layer on the Cold War context.
Right. Anything remotely left-leaning immediately set off alarm bells, especially for the U.S. and its allies.
Mm-hmm. Deep suspicion. So, as our source points out, by 1964, the pressure on Goulart was immense. The economy wasn't doing great. There were more strikes, more protests.
It sounds like a perfect storm brewing.
It really was. And interestingly, his attempts to kind of navigate this, maybe find some middle ground, or even engage with left-wing factions,
That backfired.
it seemed to. It just heightened the fears among the military and the business elites. Even if he was trying to appear moderate, they started seeing him more and more as, well, a potential communist sympathizer.
It's like he was caught in a bind. Anything he did just fed the narrative against him.
Kind of, yeah. Which leads us to March 31st, 1964. The military launches the coup.
But the source says it wasn't just the military acting alone.
That's a really key point. There were civilian opposition groups backing it too, people genuinely worried about the country's direction under Goulart.
And the U.S. role. That always comes up.
Always. The source mentions U.S. officials were definitely worried. The fear was Brazil might become another Cuba.
A communist foothold in South America.
That was the nightmare scenario for Washington back then. And this question of U.S. involvement, it just hangs over the whole event.
Our source mentions declassified documents.
Yes. Showing that the U.S. government under LBJ offered support. Things like financial aid, intelligence, maybe even military resources to the opposition.
Wow. So not just watching from the sidelines.
It certainly suggests more than that. The CIA's exact role is, still debated by historians, but the evidence points to real communication. Active engagement between American officials and the Brazilian military leaders planning the coup.
So did they know it was coming?
Reports mentioned in the source suggest they did, knew about the plans, even offered support to the officers involved.
And the justification was?
The belief that Goulart was leaning towards communism, that he was a risk despite his more moderate public stance, it was all seen through that Cold War prism.
So was it a purely Brazilian affair that the U.S. just happened to support? Or was there more active foreign involvement in making it happen? That's the big question, isn't it?
It is. And while the source points towards significant U.S. involvement, it also stresses we can't ignore the powerful domestic forces.
Right, the Brazilian elites themselves, the
Yeah.
business leaders, the landowners.
They weren't just sitting back, they were deeply alarmed by Goulart's ideas. Land reform, support for labor unions, this was terrifying to them.
And they were talking to the military.
Constantly in the months leading up, essentially creating the conditions, maybe even encouraging the military to step in. They saw the military as their guarantee against Goulart.
And the military had a history of intervening in politics in Brazil.
Oh, yes. Since the late 19th century, really, they saw this as a moment to, regain their dominance.
Under the guise of defending democracy?
That was the justification, yes. Quite ironic, considering they then established a dictatorship that lasted until 1985.
A brutal one, too. The source mentions repression, censorship.
Swift and brutal. Political opponents, activists, anyone seen as left-wing faced persecution. It shows the real goal wasn't saving democracy, but seizing control.
It really highlights those complex alliances, military, business, politics, all working together, shaping Brazil's future for decades.
And what happened to Goulart himself after the coup?
Well, he was forced into exile, moved around Uruguay, Argentina, Paraguay, back to Uruguay eventually.
Became a symbol of resistance, I suppose?
He did, for many, though the military regime worked hard to paint him as a communist collaborator, to tarnish his image.
Standard playbook. Discredit the ousted leader.
Exactly. He tried to get back to Brazil, apparently, but it never happened. He died in exile in 1976, living relatively quietly by then.
But his death, the source mentions some suspicion around it.
Yeah, that's another lingering question. Officially, it was a heart attack. But there have always been suspicions, theories that maybe he was poisoned.
By the regime.
By agents of the regime, yes. The idea being they still saw him as a threat, even in exile, someone who could rally opposition. So was it natural causes, or was it something more sinister, an assassination we still don't definitively know?
It just adds another layer of tragedy to this story.
Definitely. And the source really emphasizes that Goulart's overthrow wasn't just about one man. It was a massive turning point for Brazil.
Absolutely. It ushered in this really dark period, 21 years of military rule, repression, state-sponsored violence.
The numbers are just staggering. Thousands tortured, disappeared, killed. It's chilling when you think about the human cost of these political shifts.
And you have to see it in the wider context, too, right? The Cold War playing out across Latin America.
Yeah, similar stories in Chile, Argentina, military coups, authoritarian regimes.
Often with varying levels of U.S. backing or knowledge. Brazil's coup was part of that larger tragic pattern in the region during that time.
So that period ending only in 1985, it just shows how deep the impact of '64 was. Goulart's fall really was this pivotal, painful moment.
No doubt about it. It fundamentally altered Brazil's path for decades.
So wrapping this up, it seems clear the fall of João Goulart wasn't simple. It was this potent mix of Brazil's own internal conflicts.
Deep class tensions, political rivalries.
Right. All massively amplified by the Cold War. The global ideological battle basically landed right in Brazil.
And you had this convergence. The military wanting power back, the elites terrified of losing their status, and the U.S. determined to stop anything it saw as left-wing influence nearby.
These weren't separate forces. They formed alliances. The source makes that clear. Military, business, maybe foreign powers all aligning.
It really exposes the sometimes brutal realities of political power, how fragile democracy can be when faced with that kind of opposition, both inside and out.
Goulart's story is just a stark reminder, isn't it? The human cost, the danger of foreign interference, the need to constantly safeguard democratic systems.
And thinking about this deep dive, maybe the question to leave you, the listener, with is this. Considering what happened in Brazil and maybe in other countries with similar histories, what are the long-term effects when power becomes so unbalanced? When systems become vulnerable to these kinds of internal and external pressures, it feels incredibly relevant, even today.